Let's unpack our kits together. For those of you who have kits, you're going to find that we have two different fabrics for weaving, Fabrics 1 and Fabric 2 for weaving. We have Totally Stable, which is my favorite go-to stabilizer. I use it in so many different ways in different projects. We have our batting. This is Thermolam. It's a nice flat needle punched fleece. And then our fusible, which I like to use the Pellon Wonder Under. It's a inexpensive and it's a workhorse and it works really well for this technique. We also have our two little applique fabrics, flowers, as well as some green for some stems. And then we have, of course, the backing fabric and then binding fabric as well. It should all be labeled. So if there's any confusion, just let me know. The first two fabrics we're going to be working with are going to be the weaving fabrics and the fusible. For those of you who are using the half circle weaving project kit, you have your two weaving fabrics, the light yellow and more of a golden tan. We have our fusible, we have our Totally Stable and our batting. We also have our backing material. We have our binding fabric and our two applique fabrics for the water and the mountains. To prepare our fabrics for weaving, we want to make sure that we have fusible web on the back side of both fabrics. If you're using your own fabrics and it's not a batik, so one side looks better than the other, you want to make sure that you're putting the fusible on the wrong side, the side that you don't want to see. So let's trim up our fusible so that it is the right size for our fabrics. Basically, you want to be giving yourself 7 inches by 17, which is the width of the fusible. So you'll cut your fusible into segments that are 7 inches wide and then 17 inches long, which is just the length of the fusible itself. You might also trim down the fabrics that you have, your weaving fabrics, so that they match that size as well. Or you could just put the fusible on the fabric now and then trim it after we've got it fused. Remember that this is an art project, so it doesn't have to be an exact science. Even though that may be your wheelhouse, it's fun to stretch out a little bit and allow yourself to be a little bit more wiggly-giggly than you normally are. Now that we have our fabrics ready for the fusible, I'm just going to make sure that there aren't any creases or pleats in the fabric that I don't want to see or fuse into place. So I'll just give these a quick press and make sure that they're nice and flat and ready for the project ahead. Now you'll notice even on a batik, sometimes you will see a difference between one side or the other. That is fine. My mother's rule is that we pay for both sides of the fabric, so you get to decide which side you want to use or show. So that is your choice. Whatever side you don't want to show is going to be the side that we adhere the fusible to. Now I'm working on an applique pressing sheet or a pressing mat, and that protects my ironing surface from any fusible that may go off the edge of the fabric. So if your fusible is slightly larger than your fabric and you're on an applique pressing sheet, it's not going to stick to your ironing board or to your iron, and that is definitely a preferable way of using this. You'll notice that I am pressing, I am not ironing. I'm using an up-down motion and a nice hot dry iron. In order for the fusible to bond correctly to the fabric, you want to make sure that it's sitting on the fabric for a good 5 to 8 seconds. So after I've gone over the entire thing initially to make sure everything is nice and flat, I'm going to continue applying heat until I can tell that that fusible has adhered to the fabric. You can see a little change in coloration as you have that heat hit and melt the glue onto your fabric. The nice part about it is you have a little bit of glue that was off to the side. It's now just on the pressing sheet and it does not stick because it's Teflon, which means I can just rub it right off. Again, choose the side of fabric that you want to see and use the back side or the side you don't want to see, and that's where your fusible is going to go. Placing the glue side down, paper side up. Don't want to get that mixed up, otherwise your iron will be a little bit of a mess. And then just press that fusible onto the fabric, giving it a good amount of time in each section on a nice dry cotton setting. Now, if you're using a different style of fusible, you're going to want to follow the instructions for that fusible. As I mentioned in the email, as well as on the Facebook group, I do not recommend using the Steam-A-Seam 2 for this technique, mainly because the tacky quality of the fusible, when it's not heated, can be a bit cumbersome. It is possible, but it will make your life a little bit more difficult, and we're about keeping things easy and fun. All right, so we have both of our weaving fabrics now fused, and we are ready for the next step.